seeking and questioning.
Well, I think about when you were a child in Somalia, and your identity was formed by being a girl, that you pretty much established who you were in your society. And then you moved out of that society, and you came to Europe, and you were a black African. That seems like it would have been much more powerful than in that context, that you were defined much more that way. Now you're in America, and those qualities are probably shaded a little differently. So how is it different?
It's different in that you have accumulated experience. Coming out of Africa and coming to Europe, I didn't identify myself as an African because everybody in Africa was an African.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm born in '69, which is after decolonization, so everyone around me was black, the same color, and it was always, I went to Muslim Girls Secondary School in Nairobi, and if we went to town, the center, that's where you saw white people, and they were tourists. They were carrying cameras around, and they were surrounded by a group of young men who offered them wares that we didn't want to buy, but they seemed to want to buy large wooden masks. And so that was one stereotype of the white man. That's what you saw. But when you went to, in school, you got to read books. You went to the movies. You saw a different dimension of what being white was, and it always represented having these wonderful adventures that we didn't have, either because we were not allowed to or because we didn't have enough money to have those adventures. Now, coming to Holland, coming to Germany, for the first time, I saw large numbers of white people. And it was in the summer, and they were largely pink. And that's when you think, oh God, I stick out. I'm different. But at the time, my first experience in Holland was one of politeness. I was welcomed. I was put in a place called an asylum seeker center, and I was treated so well. The first man in uniform I saw asked if he could get me a cup of coffee. So my accumulated experience from Africa was people in uniform, people who represent the state, repress you. They rape you. They take things away from you. They don't give you. And here I was confronted with a society that looked different, but that also acted different, that were kind and generous and obsessed with values such as equality and freedom. In the Netherlands, more about equality. In the United States, more about freedom. So with that experience, with what I read, with what the debates that are going on, I now feel like I'm a complete member, even though you are quite pink here tonight. But in general, I don't feel... I always ask myself, if I were to take a plane now and go to Nairobi and go and live in the neighborhood that I grew up in, those neighborhoods that I grew up in, would I be a happier person? And my answer is, no, I would not be a happier person. And as long as that is the case, I think I will, I'll probably not complain so much about being different.
You know, one more question. You lived in Kenya for a while, which is President Obama's father's roots. And I wonder what you think about Obama, and also how you reacted to his overture to the Muslim world in June.
I think Obama, first time I saw him and heard him, I thought, first of all, I thought he was incredibly handsome. And then I thought he is capable, well-educated, well-established, ran a wonderful campaign. I heard him I first took him seriously after his speech in Iowa when he defeated Hillary Clinton. And I took him seriously not only because who he was and what he was saying, but because of the reaction of the American people to him. And I thought it said more about the American people and their history than Obama. I followed the elections here in New York, and I remember young people running at me and clutching me and saying, "Are you not excited? We're going to have a black president. Are you too excited about the prospect of a black president?" And I would go, "I don't know. I've only known black presidents. I'm not going to be excited about a politician just because of his color," which, by the way, is, in a way, I know it is coming to terms with the history of this country, but in a way, assuming that someone, because she's a woman, someone because he's black, someone because he's young, is going to be a good and accomplished leader, that assumption is wrong in my view. My reaction to his speech in the Arab world, I was asked by a German paper, Allgemeine Zeitung, or Frankfurt, Die Zeit, very liberal according to American terms. In Europe, we call them very left-wing. They asked me to write a response, and my response is posted in the Huffington Post. I thought he should have been more truthful. I mean, he did a good job. He's a good speaker. We know that now. But I thought he could have been more honest about the three things that were first published in 2002 by the Arab Human Development Report. That was the lack of freedom. It was the subjection of women to a degree Westerners can never understand, and I think will never understand. You just don't know that. Even in the worst, blackest days for women in the West, in history, it's never been as bad as it is in Saudi Arabia. You've seen that in Afghanistan, even in places like Egypt, even in places like Morocco. So he should have spoken about those two, and he should have spoken about, so it was women's rights, it was the lack of freedom, and it was the knowledge deficit. My piece is he should have brought them Kindles. He took Queen Elizabeth an iPod, and I thought, wow, what if he had taken Kindles full of information, and I would give him a reading list, and he would hand them out. But those were the three things that I hoped he would speak about. That was from an intellectual perspective. From a political perspective, of course, I understood that Obama had to make a statement that he was different from George Bush, that he was going to follow a different course, and he was going to say, I'm not going to confront you, but I'm going to invite you to come on board. And history will tell us whether they will accept that invitation or not.